Good evening. Welcome to Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector podcast. I am your host, Tabatha L. Tonight, I will give you a list of common reasons why electrical inspections fail on the final inspection. The final inspection takes place when all the electrical has been completed and before the tenants are allowed to move in and begin using this space. At this stage of the construction process, all of the walls are closed, the paint is being done, the flooring is being done, and furniture is being installed. And now we're at the stage where we want to make sure that everything's done in the building. So I want to walk you through some of the common reasons that I've found when I'm doing the electrical inspections that are reasons that they frequently fail on the final. I'll start by walking through and starting with an open ceiling. So what is an open ceiling? So the open ceiling is a part of the ceiling during the construction process where we don't get a ceiling cover because there's not a ceiling there. You have no type of ceiling there. There's not a drywall ceiling, hard ceiling, some call it, suspended ceiling, drop ceiling. There's no acoustic ceiling. There's no type of ceiling, so it's just open space. Some call that an industrial look, and it has, sometimes they have fireproofing above, some type of foam to conceal the ceiling, or sometimes they paint the ceiling. But the point I'm making here is that it's open, and during the inspection process, during the temp op, it doesn't have to have an inspection because it can be inspected during the final. So some of the common issues that I find when I'm doing these type of inspections for the open area, when you're installing devices in the ceiling, and because it's an open ceiling, you don't have a grid there. You don't have ceiling support. You have to, now you must support your device to structure. So how do you do that? The common problem that I see, they do it, the contractor, if they need to support fire alarm devices, horn strobes, smoke detectors, sirens, pennant lights, exit lights, egress lights, cameras, speakers. These are some of the things that are supported in the ceiling, the open ceiling. So the problem, what they support it with, would be EMT conduit. So that EMT conduit has a set screw, or it could be a compression connector. And the problem with that is that in Article 314.23e, the device shall have a threaded entry, a raceway, or identified hub, and you have to support it by if you don't have an identifiable hub, you have to support it with some type of threaded rod or threaded conduit, like IMC or rigid. So most of the time, that's what I see is EMT. So that's not a support that's allowed. So just remember, if you have these type of devices in an open ceiling area, you need to do threaded rod or have an identifiable listed hub for that type of application. And that's in the open ceiling area. I have a lot of that, and that takes a lot of rework to do that. Also, I'm going to move along, keep it going, with service receptacles. Now, when I come on the final, the service receptacles are something that are surface mounted most of the time, and they're in service areas or just in certain areas where service may be required. So they're sometimes often overlooked during the process of the inspections. So here I'm going to give you a few areas where the receptacles are often overlooked. As I mentioned earlier, rooftop units, the AC units, you have to have a receptacle within 25 feet. That's often overlooked. You can find that in Article 21063. That's the 2014. Service receptacles and service meters. If you have a commercial building, it's two-family or more dwelling, for your service on the outside, you're going to need a service receptacle on the outside, and that has to be within 50 feet of that service meter. And on the inside as well, in a commercial building or more than two-family dwelling, you would have to have a service receptacle. That's often overlooked because that came into play in 2014. That article was added, and it's 210.64, and it's in 2014. Elevators. So I have a problem. Well, there is often, because that area is always under construction. When I'm doing the temp OC and I'm doing the rough cover inspection, the elevators are always under construction. So I never get to do the elevators until the very end, even if I try to get it in during the temp OC, because they're still doing the elevator work. So when I'm looking at the elevator at the end, these are some issues that I've had issues with. You can't have any raceways or anything over the elevator equipment, like the hoist equipment in the elevator room. You can't have any raceways or anything over that equipment. That's happened on two jobs that I've had. So that's a big one. So just remember, when you're looking at elevators, and you can find that in Article 620, 37, and it reads, the elevator equipment room and the shaft, nothing should pass through it if it's not associated with the elevator. I want to touch on that some, because as I stated, the elevator is under construction during the construction process, so I don't get to look at it until the end, and most of the time it's on that final. So now when I go in the elevator equipment room or the pit or the shaft area, what that means is that when it says nothing can pass through if it's not associated with the elevator. So no other cable, anything, fire alarm, cable, speaker, nothing can pass through that area of any of those elevator equipment rooms if it's not associated with the elevator. You have to reroute that whole, it has to stop in that room. Now, I've had that on a few jobs. So if it doesn't have anything to do with the elevator room, if you're not bringing a circuit in there to feed the light, if you're not bringing a circuit in there to feed the receptacle, if you're not feeding the fire alarm that's in there, you can't have anything that's not associated with it. And I just want to make that clear, because we're at the final, and that's going to be a big issue to resolve because the ceilings are closed at this point. So just keep that in mind, because I've had that happen a few times. I'm still in elevators. We're going to go to Article 620.23 and 24. This is often forgotten. In the elevator room, a GFCI receptacle is required. Now, in 2014, it just says it has to be a receptacle, but 2020, Article 620.60 says it has to be GFCI protected. But that's a requirement, that it has to be GFCI protected. So that's often forgotten when I do the inspections in the elevator machine room it's required in the pit and in the elevator shaft on top of the car. So that's a requirement. Look at that article, 620.23. Motorized projection screens need disconnects or attachment plugs. So these are projection screens that are in like office spaces when they want to do a presentation and you have a projection screen that's motorized. So you have to have a disconnect. It can't be hardwired because it's motorized. It has a motor. So it has to have a disconnect to disconnect that motor on site, within sight, or capable of being locked. But most of the time, you'll just put a toggle switch in the ceiling pad and add yourself an attachment plug or a switch. This one, often receptacles located within 6 feet of any sink. GFCI protection required. The question I get often is, it's not a kitchen sink. Article 210.8, it gives you different sinks and different types of reasons why GFCI protection is required. In a sink, it just says a sink. So that's anything with water is a sink. It can be in a janitor's closet. It can be a bathroom, kitchen. It can be a wet bar sink. If it's within 6 feet of a sink, it's required. I get that often. Commercial kitchens, all 120 amp receptacles must be GFCI protected. I get that often in the commercial kitchens. Now, where it becomes blurry and some people may have an issue with is in the kitchen, the commercial kitchen, you often have like a manager area there. So in that manager area, if you have a door that separates the kitchen from the manager office, and it's a door, that's an office. That's separate. But if that little nook is in that kitchen area, right next to it where it's a sink, those receptacles must be GFCI protected because that's considered the kitchen area. Also, I want to mention for the kitchen area, the GFCI receptacles must be accessible. Often with the large commercial equipment, it's blocked. But you got to keep that in mind when you're laying it out and putting this equipment on the countertop, that it has to be readily accessible. Now, we're talking about the final. So this could be one of those locations where I gave them a temp OC, and now I'm coming back to do the final. In areas like this, in commercial kitchens, restaurants, just areas like where they prepare food, certain clubs that we have where they prepare food, areas like this, they tend to block the panels that are located in the kitchen with shelves, garbage cans, or just kitchen equipment, and that's a violation of the National Electrical Code and a violation of the fire protection. So you can't put anything in front of the panel. Those breakers need to be readily accessible as well. And I need to get to that panel for the final. And that's what normally happens. I have to wait on someone to come and move all of that equipment from in front of the panel. So just keep that in mind. Don't block the panels. Okay, also for the commercial kitchen equipment, all kitchen equipment with motors require a disconnect switch or attachment plug. So that could be dishwashers, it can be the Instant Hot. If anything in that kitchen that has a motor, it's required to have a disconnect. And that disconnect can be a receptacle or attachment. We're still in the kitchen. We're still in the commercial kitchen. I have this issue often walk-in coolers, the AC evaporator coil motor, the motors for the AC evaporator coils. Those are required to have a disconnect switch. That get missed often because often the electrician will tell me that they got it on top of the unit. Because it's an AC piece of equipment, evaporator coil, AC cooling, it's an AC equipment, you have to have a disconnect switch within sight, right next to it. And because it's in that cooling area, it has to be in a weatherproof box. I have had that happen a few times where they put it in a regular 1900 box. So it has to be in a weather-rated box because it's in the cooler. So remember, two things that I hit often: walk-in coolers, disconnect switch, and the type of junction box you're installing it in. It has to be rated for the weather. Okay. I'm out of the kitchen now, so this we could be showcase window receptacles. Article 210. I wanted to go back for the commercial kitchen with the motors, and I wanted to give you some articles. It was Article 430.75, Article 440.14, and for the commercial kitchen receptacles, Article 210.8B2. And for appliances, for all appliances, Article 422.5. Just want to give you some articles to look that up for yourself. We're going to go to showcase window receptacles. This is mostly in retail stores and places that will advertise, like any type of establishment that will advertise, have advertisement to tell you that they're open, and advertisement in front of the store. So the showcase windows, those receptacles are often missed the final. You can find that in Article 210.62. And like I stated, those are retail stores, gas stations, some restaurants, cell phone stores, places like that, just places that sell things. This is something that I've hit a few times. I'm going into healthcare areas now, like chiropractor buildings, urgent care places, the hospitals, dental places, different places like that, just patient care areas. You have to remember that with the patient care rooms, the receptacles have to be listed and the receptacles have to be hospital grade. I fail that often in those type of places, the healthcare places. So that's Article 517.18. Electrical signs. So if you have a business that has an electrical sign, the sign must be listed because most of these signs are special design. So remember to have that sign listed before it get on the job site, and it has to have a disconnect, a means of disconnect. Normally on the signs, they just have a little toggle switch to disconnect it, and it's capable of being locked in the lock position. So they have a lock on there as well. So you can find that in Article 600.3, 600.6. I have some issues with the listings. Like I mentioned, with the listing issues, I try to get those resolved before the temp op. But if it lingers out, because if they have the contract and everything is allowed and we're moving forward, now we're at the final, the report. If they did a field evaluation, you have to have a report that they will send to the jurisdiction, the authority having jurisdiction. They will send the report. And once we get that report, the furniture that was called into question with the listing issues, now that will be resolved at the final. But I can't give you a final until I receive that report. So just keep that in mind. Do not call a final in until your listing issues have been resolved. To mention that, now those are the furnishings and the office furniture that I found during the temp OC. Sometimes when I come back on the final, I find little things that they've added, that the owner bought, and the electrical contractor, they didn't know that the owner purchased this furniture. Some of that furniture include like in the dental offices, and it could be also like in regular like office spaces, like buildings, office buildings, waiting areas. They'll have little tables there, and the tables can have receptacles installed inside the tables with the USB jack, and it can also have a lamp installed. Now, this furniture often comes out after the fact. The issue that I've often found on the majority, and when I say the majority, I probably would say 90% of this furniture that comes out on the commercial jobs, they have a maximum rating of 15 amps itself. And if you look at that tag, it'll tell you that the maximum amperage allowed is 15 amps. Now you're in a commercial setting, you have installed a 20 amp. I get that often. More lately now because of the type of furnishing it is, they're doing it more now. So I get that often. Just remember to look at the furniture if it comes on site, because the electrician, they often ask me, why are they responsible for that? Because it's your permit. So any electrical work that's done there under your permit, you're responsible for. So we got to take in consideration everything that comes in there electrical. So in sense, you're protecting your license. That's what the inspections are for. That's why we're working together to make sure that everything's safe. That's a common problem in your dental office, waiting rooms, because people have the cell phones, they're plugging them in. Just look out for that, because that is, I mentioned the office furniture. So you still have the cubicles. Sometimes they share receptacles. Sometimes they share circuits. They'll share a neutral. That's not happening as often, but every now and then I'll have circuits that share neutrals. Don't forget to either use a 2-pole breaker or you must use listed tie handles. I have that issue often. So now I'm going to go into like a sporting area, gyms at schools or auditoriums or like play areas. So if you have like a sporting area and you have electrical equipment that protrudes off the wall, like a fire alarm device, like the pool station, if you have the horn strobe on the wall, if you have a camera on the wall, if you have a thermostat and it just sits on the wall, surface mounted, and it sits on the wall, it's subject to physical damage in that gym area, with balls and everything being thrown around, people just playing around in that area is subject to physical damage. That's often overlooked because it's in a gym area. You need to put a cage or some type of protection over it, like a basket or cage. So that's something that needs to be taken in consideration, because I've failed that a few times. Now we're getting down to it. So the panels, the labels for the panels, all the panel schedules, the warning signs, the hazard signs, the generator labels, All of these things should be on the panels. Everything that should be labeled at this point in time. All the markings. Nothing should be forgotten. This is the final inspection. As you've heard, I've walked you through quite a bit, and that's a lot of things to look at during the inspection process. With that being said, because it's going to be a long process, you're allowed to call in inspections and break them up. So if you know that I need to look at the rooftop, let's do it ahead of time to try to get it eliminated so that we won't have to walk through that process 2 or 3 hours doing a final inspection. So I just said that to let you know that we can break it up and just try to call them in and get as much done as possible. So now finally, we're done. And the building permit should be on site. And before I sign the building permit card, every electrical contractor that was involved in that project must call in their final permit. Before I can sign the card, everyone has to call in. So that's a lot of confusion as well, because one contractor will call in. If I had 7 contractors on that job, I can't sign the building card until the last contractor called in his inspection. So that's why it's a good idea. A lot of the contractors, they all get together and they call in their final inspection together so that it can be done and everybody will be complete and the building card will get signed, and that's the last step in that process, signing the building card. And that does it for the electrical inspections, the process that I tried to walk you through from the beginning of a new commercial project. I walked you through the ground rough, the wall rough, ceiling cover, temp on service, the temp out, and then finally the final. So that completes it. But I did receive a few requests by email asking if I would provide information on the grounded B face. It's 240 or 480. So next Wednesday, I will give you a list of common code issues that I have experienced with the grounded B phase. And I'll give you the information that I know about the grounded B phase. I know it's different in different areas, so I'm just going to give you the information that I know about the St. Louis region with the grounded B phase. So tune in next week as I give further information on that grounded B phase. If you have any questions or comments, please contact me on any of the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, under the moniker Ask the Lady Electrical Inspector. If you would like to add to this discussion or provide any feedback, you can email me at asktheladyelectricalinspector@gmail.com with any questions or concerns. Thank you for tuning in, and good night.